Hey, family. This is me, Bishop John Selders, and welcome to um, our sixth night during this Holy Week of Holy Action. Um, we, More Money CT, partnered with our sister organization, Connecticut Black Women, and our other co-sponsoring organizations, the Voluntown Peace Trust and Hartford Catholic Worker. We've been working hard all week long to bring and to lead and to be in the work of doing what it is that we do. I hope you have, but I have thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to share. We've been in conversation. We've been out in the streets doing what it is that we do. And tonight, I am excited that we will be talking with some family members to me and for me, and we will have a specific conversation around Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives and the work and the witness that has been for us anyway over the last now 7 years. Wow, the last 7 years it's been at the center of what our activism and social justice activism has been. I let me bring in our family who and let me for the first time get to introduce them with this new title. Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. I can't hardly believe it. We have journeyed together for a good long time. And so I'm going to bring into the room now. I get to call you for the first time publicly, the Reverend Dr. L.A. McCray. Hey.
That's right. That's right. Good evening, Bishop. So great to be here with you.
It is great to be here with you. You know, we go back a ways, and what I thought we would do. We're gonna be joined by another family member or two, maybe, during the course of this next hour. But what I wanted to do is spend some time talking, particularly about your intersection, your cross sectioning. With the work that you've been engaged in all your life. See, I get to say that because I know a little bit about what that journey has looked like. And you are a long time. Your family and your family before you got here and before they got here, they church folk, good Methodists,
That's Methodist.
Right. So you know, Wesleyan has played a part in shaping your religious witness. Now, what I'm so proud of is over the last maybe 15 years, I've had my hand in helping to shape some of that too. So we ain't going down that road. But what I really appreciate about what you have been able to do is you have lived your faithful witness in large measure outside of the traditional four walls of the church house. And I want to bring some of that flavor to this conversation because I believe for us, let me set it up by saying this. I'm a son of a Ferguson, sort of, kind of, right next door. I'm really for real. I'm from Kinloch. Y'all don't know nothing about no Kinloch, but for those who know a little bit about Kinloch, y'all can rep on that Kinloch. It's a nearing suburb of St. Louis, right next door, just west of Ferguson. And so when the movement jumped off there in Ferguson, we were right there. That was home for us. For Pamela. Pamela was born in St. Louis, my beloved. Our children were born in St. Louis. So you know, when the stuff dusted up there, you know, we went home. We went home and got involved, and certainly it helped to shape and change our public witness over these last years. Mike Brown's death. And let me say this so that we are very clear. While the hashtag Black Lives Matter existed, it was in response to Trayvon Martin's killing in Sanford, Florida. It was only when Ferguson jumped off that Black Lives Matter took on shape and form and became what we now call a movement. So I want to say that and say that unequivocally that it is Ferguson that holds that distinction. All roads at one time for over a year led the movement front was in Ferguson. All right, and so and of course, as you know, being family and from Bmore, when Bmore jumped off, you know, we was in the car headed to Bmore, down there with you all who were there at that front. Talk a little bit about what drew you into the work and into the movement over these last few years. LA.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bishop, for having me here this evening. And I think, like many of us, I was personally struck by Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice. Currently, I'm in Owings Mills, Maryland, and less than 3 miles from where I live, Corinne Gaines was killed. But initially what brought me into this work was my background, my Wesleyan beliefs and shaping and faith-based community organizing and activism. If I go all the way back to John and Charles Wesley being outside of the prisons preaching abolition then, right? That is up in my spirit with who I am. So specifically, this work that we're doing now in prison abolition and faith-based community organizing for Black liberation, I am called to this work by the memory of J. Lateef Saulveg Williams, who was assassinated by the Asheville Police Department, Sergeant Tyler Radford, on July 2nd, 2016. And regardless of what folks say and believe, the Asheville police left Jerry Williams on the pavement in his neighborhood for 2 hours and 25 minutes after they filled his body with bullets and shot off his arms. Jerry was still alive. Those officers didn't provide any type of life-giving care and didn't call, for any medical backup for over an hour. So, when I think about why I do this work and who I do this work for, yes, of course, as Black Lives Matter, ATO would say, to avenge the suffering of our ancestors. Absolutely. And I have to look in the eyes of Kiari and Messiah and all the rest of little Jerry's kids and grandkids at this point and make sure that I'm doing everything in my power every day to pursue justice for their daddy.
So let me get this straight. Let's just, for the folk who are witnessing this live and who will see this archived later. We're talking about Asheville, North Carolina.
Hold
on. Because my knowledge of Asheville, North Carolina, is this liberal bastion of all this diversity, a lot of Birkenstocks and granola. And
tofu, beer,
tofu, right? Here's this place and space where this mix, this rainbow coalition mix in Asheville, North Carolina. You mean to tell me you got police brutality in Asheville?
Yeah, so Jerry Williams wasn't the first Black person killed in Asheville. So we have A.J. Marion that was killed in Asheville, Black man. On the same streets that Jerry Williams was killed, a Black woman was killed by police in Asheville. And so the thing to understand about Asheville, of course, it is this melting pot and a queer mecca. And there is, and for those of you who can look this up, look up the state of Black Asheville, and you will see that over 90% of residents in Black Asheville are living at or below the poverty limit. So when we're looking at Black Asheville, it is not the tourist and this and that. I'm talking about folks over there in the hood, right? Jerry was riding from Beaverview, which is the hood, over to PVA, which is another hood, right? We were operating underneath the system. So when you think about Asheville, it's important to think about the socio-political context. This is the same city in which Black organizer activists turned Martin Luther King Jr. away on the tarmac and said, don't bring that here. We got Asheville. Get back on that plane, boy. This is the same Asheville that James Baldwin drove through on the bus, looked around, was like, no, I'm not getting off this bus. Ain't nothing but trouble in Asheville. And James Baldwin kept rolling, right? So there is a very particular type of organizing that happens in Asheville that is the reason why many people have not heard of Jerry Williams, right? There's folks on the inside that are doing this crabs in the barrel, and Adrienne Maree Brown talks a little bit about this in their recent 2 works on transforming conflict and We Will Not Cancel Us, right? So we're getting into all of those interpersonal dynamics, interpersonal politics, which prohibit us from pursuing justice for Jerry.
So thank you for setting up what we wanted to make sure that we were driving home.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have the high profile murders.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Brown, Tamar Rice, Philando Castile, Eric Garner, Sterling Brown. Then we got Rekia Boyd. We got Breonna Taylor. We got Aubrey.
Tony
right?
McDade.
We got Laquan McDonald.
That's right.
We got George Floyd. Right.
That's right.
But here's everywhere there is Black folk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In every major or small urban center. I know, because we've been to many of these communities, mm-hmm. where they can talk about their own versions of Mike Brown. Here in Hartford,
right.
we talk about Aquan Solomon, 21, 22 years ago. His killing turned this place here upside down or Malik Jones, mm-hmm. down south of us in New Haven.
Mm-hmm.
We've had 2 what I would call high profile but localized incidents. I'm reminded of what happened very quickly with Freddie Gray in
mm-hmm.
Beaver, right?
Yep.
There was a dust up, turn up, and then whoop, put that genie back in the bottle. We're not having that here.
That's
and
right.
So what you're speaking of is what happens far more times than we would want to ever look at, right? Mm-hmm. That there mm-hmm. might be a local dust up, right? There might be a moment, that was that Trayvon Martin moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
That the world heard about it. There was a little bit of dust up, but I'll own some of this. Some of us who were organizers wasn't ready for it. Mm-hmm. Wasn't that moment for the movement to jump off, right? It needed a couple of more moments. And I'll say historically, that's the way it happens. Mm-hmm. I believe the Montgomery bus boycott wouldn't have had the kind of wind at its back that it did if it had not been for the overturning of the Brown versus Board of Education, mm-hmm. and that landmark decision overturning separate but equal, all right, Plessy versus Ferguson, mm-hmm. In 1896, and the brutal killing of Emmett Till. Mm-hmm. And let's give credit where credit is due. Another Black woman needed a Black woman mm-hmm. in front of that thing, Mamie Till.
That's said, right.
They killed my son. This is what they did to him, and I'm gonna make it public so you can see what they did to my boy. And so it was those 2 that were the precursors for what happened in Montgomery. So I believe we needed a couple of things to occur, and then our nieces and nephews in the Lou just said, okay, we done had it, and they didn't access CNN and MSNBC. Mm-hmm. They went to Twitter. Mm-hmm. They went to Facebook, and the movement got its start and started to proliferate because young people took the mantle. And let me be clear, in Ferguson, they didn't wait for the NAACP. Mm-hmm. They did not wait for the Urban League and all the other the Black preachers They had no, it wasn't no Baptist Union, but right? None of that occurred. It was our nieces and nephews who said we done had it, and we gonna hit these streets. We out here.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Right? And they went, hands up, don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot. And that thing caught a hold. And we're here now in conversation some 7 years, almost 7 years later.
That's right.
Because of that, I'm going to call it a holy witness. One of my brothers, Reverend Osaji Chifu Sekou, he says it like this. He said, I got born again in Ferguson, on the streets of Ferguson, right? So there's this spiritual contexting that draws us into this work. Let me bring on my other family member has just joined us, and I appreciate very much the sacrifice he has done just to get on this thing right here. Come on in here, Dr. Edward Donaldson III. Greet the people and say hello. This is family. The Reverend Doctor, she's newly minted doctor, by the way, newly minted. L.A. McCray, they have been our family members for a very, very long time. So I got family with me tonight. We're just gonna have family conversation.
Hello, family. It's wonderful to be with you.
Likewise.
Dr. Donaldson, could you for a moment, we just been talking, Dr. McCray referenced, their entry into the work, vis-a-vis Baltimore, because that's home, and also Asheville, North Carolina. Would you speak a little bit about your entree into the work and how you see the intersection, if you will, of Black Lives Matter and our faith traditions and our faithful witness, if in fact that makes some sense to you? I think it does.
Sure, absolutely. I was pastoring a church with a majority millennials at the time of Trayvon Martin, with a lot of millennial men who looked a lot like Trayvon Martin. And then we responded to the Trayvon Martin moment, but when the Michael Brown moment came, then I had an intergenerational response from my congregation. So it wasn't just the millennials, it was actually the seasoned saints who thought that they had made certain progresses in the civil rights movement and during the Black Power era that they began to see reversed, and they began to see clearly that Reaganomics and the years of that regime tricked us into a place of comfort. And when I saw the pain and anguish of the seasoned saints mixed with the disillusionment and the anger of the millennials, I began to engage the work very differently from that moment on. So that was my own personal kind of entry into the work, was a pastoral response to a congregation that was traumatized beyond recognition by the visible murder of Mike Brown and the trajectories between Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown and all of the things that happened in between those 2 points. To talk to where I see our religious tradition in relationship with the Black Lives Matter movement. As I understand the tenets of the Black Lives Matter movement, I see some very implicit God claims, not explicit language, but I know that movements in America in particular, but globally, without connection to something higher than anthropological realities, aren't sustainable long term. So my task as a theologian was then to say, what are these implicit God claims? What are these folks saying about the divine and anthropologically about us in the divine? And how do we shape language that will help religious practitioners understand the movement in context with their understanding of the divine? I also think Black Lives Matter, in its implicit claims, calls for a theology the church had yet to put on the table out to lead with, right? It calls for an intersectional theology. It calls for a theology that takes seriously the non-normative body of Jesus. It calls for a theology that understands the queer nature of the Ethiopian eunuch and the salvific moment of the Ethiopian eunuch. So it's calling us to a theology that we had heretofore not led with. It's asking us to be theologically responsive in fresh and living ways.
Well, I want to jump right there on it, because let me go back to the Ferguson moment, because I was there. Mm-hmm. Let me just say I was there. Let me drop that mic right there for a minute. And Pamela and I were there. I saw who was in leadership. They were Black, queer women. And I love my nieces and nephews, as I refer to them as. Several of them, when we were like, hey, Uncle John, I mean, we were family, right? I had family members there, quite frankly. Young people who I knew their mamas and daddies before their mamas and daddies knew each other. Now they got children, and then they got children. That's the kind of, it was all home week. We showed up on the scene, on the line. So here's what I saw happen. I saw religious folk having to be in the back in a supportive role, while those Black queer women had to take on, they were leading the effort. They were calling the movement. They were calling where we went and how we went, how long we were going to be in the place, when we were going to fall back, when we were going to push forward. And they were operating and calling that movement, those movements, on multiple fronts. There was an action at the mall. There was an action downtown. There was an action at Ferguson, at the police station, all at the same time some days. And we was running in behind. We were running in behind as faith leaders. We were running in behind just to make sure, if something popped off, we try to get ourselves in the way of it, right? And literally, what we tried to do as faith leaders was, one, be responsive to the leadership that was there. But secondly, if needed, put our bodies on the line. And then not try to jump in front, fall on our knees and say, our Father, our Mother, our God who art in heaven, hallowed be. Do you see what I'm saying? So I say it's very practical. What you've just said, the very practical aspect of what it means that the church, let me say the church in particular, but faith leaders and faith communities find their spot. We are not in the front of this one. Let's be clear. We're not in the front of this one. And part of the problem, I believe, that exists, there's a tension here. There's a generational tension. Let me just say that. But there's also Black church in Black community. We don't actually know what it means not to be in front. Talk to that, LA, because you actually had to do that.
So yeah, I want to offer for just a few moments working theology of James Baldwin, right? And the movement for Black lives. Let's take a step even further back from Black Lives Matter and talk about the movement for Black lives, which now has chapters all across the country, which is working in tandem with organizations like BYP 100, right? And these are all Black, queer, trans, woman-led organizations, right? And not just that, we see Black queer leadership rising up from the South. So when we have these white folks and white supremacists saying the South will rise again, sure enough, Black people rising up. We sure are. Go ask Stacey Abrams about that.
Right.
When I want to take back for the church folks, we're still trying to make the movement into the church. James Baldwin said, if your God isn't as big enough and expansive enough to hold this, get rid of him, fam. That's what James Baldwin said to the World Council of Churches. So when we look at how this moment has been really shaped by a Baldwinian politic, which it by itself means it's prison abolition, right? It's public theology and it's public engagement. Because Baldwin isn't saying I'm a pastor of the church. Baldwin left that behind. But what he did was the work of being the church. Now, we can call that ecclesiogenesis if we want to break it down, right? He was with the people, and the people were making meaning, creating meaning, and building community. Baldwin gives us an idea of how to lean into this with his social responsibility. We see this in the Buckley conversation, known as the pin drop speech, right? Where he says that it would be a powder keg that would blow up here in American politics. We have his public writings, which become modern day epistles. So I want to take the church again. Let's leave that Bible at the door. And I invite y'all to the open canon, right? To the canon that these organizer activists are using that consists of Baldwin, Audre Lorde, Adrienne Maree Brown, right? That is the canon. We are called, Bishop, the public witness. That's what you said. James Baldwin, the theology, right, of James Baldwin, which is shaping irrefutably the movement for Black lives right now, is shaped by this calling to be present. And when we were in Asheville last summer, literally the white supremacists and the Klans members and the police had guns on us. They had us up at the bell tower. They had guns on us. They were hitting us, spitting on us. And the only thing I knew to do to calm the waters was to pray. Will y'all pray with me? Will y'all pray with me right now? And that public witness kept us safe. And then James Baldwin offers us in this Baldwinian theology that is alive and moving right now in the movement for Black lives, a calling to be community organizers and active social change agents. It's not go out here and build churches, right? It's go out here and build strong people. Is that not what Frederick Douglass said? Right? So when we look at our faithful response to showing up to the movement for Black lives in this moment, it is to be the embodiment of the Most High Divine. We don't need to bring all that church language. It's not welcome in these circles, right? These are folks that are post-church, over church, beyond church, done with church. But what's popping up, in Dr. Donaldson, I believe you were getting to this, what's popping up is a natural type of faith and believing in the great believing, right? And in this project of liberation. So I feel at this moment, and I would love to hear from you, Dr. Donaldson, in this moment, we are called to something else, called to something more. This Holy Week, we're having these conversations, but the organizer activists, I know their thumbs are worn out, right? They're getting ready for the summer. They're getting ready for a bloody summer, because it's always going to be a bloody summer, because we know there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Black lives taken in the United States and around the world under the hands of state-sanctioned violence. And this work is not done. We who believe in freedom certainly cannot rest.
Let me jump in before Dr. Donaldson, you have a word. I think another thing that's very present, and it's my beloved placed it in the chat as a reminder. What we encountered also in Ferguson, but also in Baltimore, in Cleveland, and in some of our other spaces, we encountered not only a Black church, but a Black community that was far more interested in respectability than actually coming out on just to see about the young people, right? It was far more, they couldn't quite get over themselves because the young people were dressed in a different way. They said things in ways that we don't say in respectable church. Like, I'm not gonna say it here because y'all didn't say Bishop is cussing, but they said things and they acted in a certain kind of way, right? We shut down. Right. I hear Pamela now. She.
I'm not a bishop. I can say it. You know what I mean?
No. Y'all know what I'm saying. That thing got in the way. It was so far in the way that I would call my friends who here too. Now I'm a son. I'm family in St. Louis. I'm 3-generation preacher in St. Louis, right? So I didn't show up on the scene as some outside agitator. I learned how to drive not through Ferguson, I knew the back ways into Kinloch from Ferguson. So you know, Ferguson, home for me, right? And I would call my friend, y'all coming out tonight? Well, Bishop, what? No, it was only a few. There were faithful few who were there. Now I can call who those preachers were. I can call who those faith leaders were, but they weren't the big folk. They weren't the big folk. They were the folk who took seriously their position as support to the young people who were forwarding the work. I just wanted to lift that up.
You know, I just want to tag in there real quick. I think this is the beauty of the epistles of Paul coming to light, right? Paul didn't say, go out there and just be and just do. Paul said, when he was talking to that slave boy Onesimus, right? He said, come here and do this work with me. We're going to transform this work together. You know what I mean? We're going to bust out of this jail together. When he was sitting there waiting for the jail to be broken open at midnight, it was a public witness that transformation happens when we are in authentic, right relation with the divine.
So let me jump in, Dr. McCray. I'm enjoying you so much this evening, and I think I enter the water from a different perch. In that I think that the movement is not post-Christian, beyond Christian, or beyond the church. I think the movement is post-institutionalization, and that there must be a reclamation of the biblical narrative and of the person and work of Jesus, much in the same way you just recast the story of Onesimus and the way in which Paul finds a slave narrative, and then there's a redemptive narrative in that. I think if we can read the text from that lens, then there is a life-giving agency to what we call the church. I think the pushback is that the institution has been imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, cis, heteropatriarchal for so long, people think that the institution has nothing to offer. But if we have folks in the institution who have the courage to critique the institution in the Baldwinian tradition of critical thinking, because I don't think Baldwin left the church. I think Baldwin left the institution, but just above my head, the fire next time. Right? You go tell it on the mountain. He took the church with him. It was a reclamation of the story that said, you don't get to own the narrative because I know the narrative better than you do. And I think what we have to do as people of the way is reposition ourselves to have something to offer to folks who have only had the institution handed them. But if we can reinterpret and revitalize and reclaim the story of Jesus, the story of Paul, if the story of Jesus starts with a Palestinian Jew born under Roman occupation, right, on the underside of power and privilege, now we have something to talk about. But it's moving past the jargon that has been institutionalized, and worse than that, colonized for so long that people can't find themselves in the story. But the reality is that Black is in the book, that woman is in the book, that queer is in the book. Like from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, you're in the book. We've just allowed other folks to take the book and do with it obscene things.
Let me make sure I click in here now. So, of course I agree, Dr. Donaldson. I'm with you. And let me say this as well. It might be that what we talk about as the church is gone. That the vision now has to be that the ministry, the work is in the street. Let me say it a different way. Seem like to me, right? If you're looking at, let's take Jesus for example. One of the first acts once he gets into Jerusalem and rides in, in a kind of juxtaposition as Pontius Pilate rode in to Jerusalem in all the pomp and circumstance of the Roman Empire. Jesus rode in on a young donkey, and they quoted scripture. Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. That was scripture. That was Hebrew scripture. As they put their cloaks down, and at least in one gospel, they also had them palm leaves. I still can't find but one gospel to talk about palm leaves, and then we call it Palm Sunday. But anyway, I'm new. I said I know it. But let me talk about Holy Monday, because what they did on Holy Monday is Jesus showed up at the temple and had a turn up. He had the first Moral Monday action that has been recorded as far as I'm concerned, and that's you're talking about reinterpretation, understanding the text and seeing ourselves in that text. I see this black man saying, listen here, the house is going to be the house of prayer, not a house of den and capitalism. Y'all making money up in here. So listen to that juxtaposition, and that it was in the street he was doing the work, not just in the temple.
So, John, what you just said, how many of our pulpits have framed Palm Sunday as political satire? How many of our places of worship have named for the faithful that this is a moment of resistance, right? We tried to make it, and furthermore, that the crowd misunderstood the person of Jesus, because they said, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. They didn't say, blessed is he who is the Lord, right? So they already had a mischaracterization of the person and work of Jesus. But for us to frame it as a politicized moment is the key to me to engaging the Black Lives Matter movement and the movement for Black lives, is to say we're here and our story is relevant. And even if you don't believe in God as Savior, the historical Jesus as political activist has something to say to you and is relevant to the work that you now engage. Let's look at the brilliance of the strategy of public political satire in shaming the Roman government. The truth is, Jesus would have never been crucified for religious reasons. Jesus was only crucified because Jesus was politically engaged, and he was seen as an operative who was now a threat to the infrastructure of Rome. If we start talking that way, then the church, not the institution, but the followers of the way, become relevant in the conversation in ways I think heretofore. And let me say this quickly, I don't think we're called to lead this movement. I think what we are called to is we are called to come alongside and be in conversation with in such a way to help shape and reshape what has been Black common sense. Because our common sense is not common. Let's face it. Where common sense comes from is it comes from our churches, our sororities, our Jack and Jill, our Eastern Stars, and as these groups begin to talk and share language across the bandwidth of Black space, that rhetoric becomes Black common sense. Well, there's already a sense that's emerging amongst those that are in the movement. Our job is to be in dialogue with them and shape this conversation in new and living ways until we become living epistles read and known of men.
Thank you for that, Dr. Donaldson. I feel, and perhaps we're looking at this from two different perspectives. You know, I'm present with folks that don't want to have those conversations. And right now, what is being required, which is what's uncomfortable for most pastors, right, is relationship building. These folks don't know who you are and don't want to hear about your Jesus until they can connect with you. Right? These folks are trying to get rent paid because there's a whole bunch of them living in the house, trying to get vehicles fixed, trying to feed their families, their big, ever-growing, queer, bi, poly, whatever families, however we choose a family today, right? And so we have a misconnect, right? These young organizer activists, and I say they're young because they're calling me old now. You know, we got these young organizer activists who are on the front lines doing the work, building sustainably, building Black movement sustainably across the globe. And we are blessed just to bear witness. And in our bearing witness, our job is not to turn to them to make them disciples of our Christ. Our job is to connect with our people, right? And connect our people with the movement. They're not asking us to be leaders. And when we do have that privilege to come alongside them in that way, again, it's not ego, personality, pulpit, church, apportionment dollars. For those of y'all that know about apportionment dollars, it's not any of that they're asking for. And last summer, as I was here in Baltimore, when the police were hitting us with pepper spray, I didn't know what that was. That was hot up on your body. We were just sitting there peaceful, didn't know what happened. They pinned us in that moment. It didn't matter if I was a pastor or an organizer. What was needed was presence. And in these moments of fear, of chaos, of watching a world that's on fire, the most that we can offer is presence, sincerity of heart, authentic connections. And that to me goes much further beyond the messages that we like to proselytize in the church. What happens when the broken body of Jesus really does become good news for people who are broken, right? What happens when that broken body and that resurrected Christ, okay, that comes up early on Monday morning, when the energy, the ethos of that gets into the people authentically, right? When we can host Black joy experiences. And so that's I'm interested in continuing to build Black resilience and Black joy and Black liberation, right? And looking at the ways that we as folks who are called as ministers of the gospel to bring the good news of liberation and hope to a broken world, of how we can do that with more integrity in our relationship building with these young folks.
Yeah. So I was minded the other day, we were in conversation, and one of our brothers quoted the Bible from the Message Bible, the Gospel, John, first chapter. The Word became flesh and blood. And the Message Bible, Eugene Peterson said it like this: the Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. Ooh. So you want to talk about incarnational theology, embodied theology? We can have the highfalutin conversation about what we do in the theological circles, right? But what does it mean to embody that flesh and blood with what Reverend Dr. L.A. is naming? It becomes so relational that it's more important to be present, right, than to be even right or quoted. And here's what I know about when that happens. They know who you are. The neighborhood actually knows who you are, right? And so they looking for authenticity. They're looking for you to be for real rather than Reverend Doctor. Because quite frankly, we can roll with our crew up in the spot, right, and have a moment anywhere we want to show up at. It's not about that moment. It's about presencing for the duration. It's about presencing. It's not when the cameras are there. It's in the midnight hour when we're on the grind, as some of the young people say. I'm learning some of this new language. I'm trying to. When you on the grind, right? I'm old now, so I be using stuff and I have to check it. Am I saying it right? Am I using it in the right context? Right. The grind, and it's then that they find out. You actually find out who with you, right? Let me say this, because I got to rep St. Louis one more again. I got to rep Ferguson. They understand each other, and they know you by when you showed up on the line. I was out here day one. Well, I showed up day 6. Well, I showed up and there's that's a kind of not just credentialing. It's a kind of understanding that you were here when the cameras weren't here. You've been out here. You were out here when we were catching that tear gas. And in fact, if you have been to Ferguson, the real warriors done sucked in a couple of some tear gas a little bit. They done got that thing to come up over your eyes, and you can't breathe and you can't catch your breath. We showed up one time, and I was like, Pamela, like, what's that? I mean, we were coughing and choking and stuff because they had just lit the place up with that tear gas. That tear gas is something other. Now, and let me be clear. If you want to talk about this, we can also talk about this as well. It was when Ferguson was in conversation with Gaza, right? This global movement, right? So Gaza was saying, get the empty tear gas canisters and check the numbers on it. If it's the HB 2357810, right? You getting that? That's a particular kind of tear gas, and this is what you do to wash it out your eyes, as opposed to the FB 799773. Which is you do another thing with that. They were helping to inform the movement. Folk were talking. The technology allowed for us to be in a global conversation. We were in a global conversation. I love Pamela. We were, and they had this chant. The kids were doing, and they had a little dance to it. And in particular, my beloved used to be a cheerleader, so it was just beautiful, and it made me know we were home with our people right there. We were home. They said, "Hands up on my head! Please don't shoot me dead. I got my hands up on my head." Oh my God! Oh my God! And we can't even bring it back. We tried to use that up here a couple of times. It just fell flat. It fell flat like a door. Because there's an authenticness. Here's another piece that I think Baldwin also brings into the room. He approached activism from an authentic space. So yes, go tell it on the mountain. Yes, fire next time, because that's where he comes from. That he's rooted and linked into a narrative of our people vis-a-vis this Judeo-Christian context, but it doesn't stay in the narrative and the limited narrative of a westernized Christianity. It's bigger than that. And oh, by the way, Christianity actually was shaped by Africa. I'm gonna stop.
So let me say that I agree completely and wholeheartedly with you, Dr. McCray and Bishop Selders. I think where I offer maybe a different lens is I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and. And I think that those binary, that when we present it in ways in which it seems that these two spaces of Blackness are over against each other, I think is where we do ourselves a disservice, because much of it is in our pores, right? It's in. So for Bible study a few weeks ago, no, that's not true. Months. I'm sorry. COVID has me thinking a year was a week and a week was a month. Months ago, we had our dear brother Sekou doing nonviolent reaction. And how do you wash tear gas out of your eyes? How do you form the line? How do you sit? How do you move together? When do you break the line? Where do you keep the number for the folks to bail you out of jail? Like, that was our Bible study, right? Like, we were out in a park, literally going through the embodied motion so that people could become engaged. I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and. And I think the conversation, Dr. McCray said these folks don't even want to have the conversation. I don't know. Maybe it's a Seattle thing. But when I am out on the line, when I am marching, when we are together and folks find out that I'm clergy, I get all the questions. I get all the theological questions. So my presence being there is not to proselytize, but while I'm there, these young folks are really, really curious. Like, y'all a church? Y'all out here? Y'all? Oh, okay, this can go together. When the Paul shooting happened, John, we were in, I have a church in Portland, Oregon, and I drove down to Portland to be at Larry May's in the queer club, and our church and the club raised the money together to send to the Pulse survivors. That's the kind of both and I'm talking about, because the either or doesn't really work for us. And so if we can think, I think where I'm coming from in that middle of communication and being interlocutors together, I think that's where our greatest success will be.
Dr. Donaldson, I thank you for that. And I think I would like to offer that at this moment in our political organizing and activism, as folks who are in the tradition of Black systematics and the legacy of James Cone and Renita Weems and Katie Cannon and all those folks, all those folks, what we are being called to in this moment is recovery chaplaincy. And stay with me for a moment. We are called to be on the front lines with people as we're confronting and healing communal brokenness, individual brokenness, despair, hopelessness, nihilism. These people in the trenches, right? They're looking at stacks of bills, all of the things. And what we are called to now more than ever is chaplaincy. And that's what you were speaking to, our presence of being with the people. And that is enough. So if the church is looking at ways to engage, Adrienne Maree Brown offers this idea of, I am not afraid of what I came here to do. We are all made of God. My role is how the future comes to be. That's what Adrienne Maree Brown says. So as Black organizer, activists, faith-based organizers, and pastors, clergy, I'm curious if we can be humble enough to come back to the role of being a movement-based chaplain with the people who are suffering. That's my curiosity. And I think, if I could wave a magic wand and build cadres of Black, brown, queer, all the things, people, and release 2, 3, 5,000 folks out there this summer, because we know summer's coming, that have this understanding that what is needed more than anything else is authentic presencing, that incarnational, right? That incarnational witness. We can't be out here saying we believe in the Most High and they don't see it in us. That's what we are called to. James Cone's The Cross and the Lynching Tree. He wasn't talking about some tree that, is over in the distance. That lynching tree is every day when we wake up and get out of our doors and we interface with the world, right? The lynching tree is it can be somebody's knee on your neck. The lynching tree is going to try to get Skittles and some Arizona tea and getting shot in your neighborhood, right? We need to be recovery chaplains who are here engaged in public witness of not just the lynching tree, but the miracle of the resurrection.
Yeah. See, I think in this Holy Week moment, quite frankly, we are gifted with, might I suggest, a order. There is death, then resurrection. Right? We have Palm Sunday, Turn Up Moral Monday, right? We have the Seder meal where we fellowship together, right? Do this in remembrance of me, right? Then we have Good Friday. We call it Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and then Resurrection Sunday. I think for me, the message I would love to tell the church in relationship to the movement for Black Lives and Black Lives Matter, and as you've named it, Dr. McCray, this recovery, this chaplaincy, right? If in fact, one, I don't want nobody out there that ain't called to it. So if you can't hear this, then fall back, please. Secondly, white folk can't lead this one. Fall back. Let me just say that. Fall back. Find some Black leadership to get up under and listen to them. Now, listen to them. Write the check to them. Right? right on them kind of basis. Let me just say it like that. Yet there is something to do, and it has an order to it. And I believe it is now. COVID has made it very clear. Your buildings ain't worth too much right now. And just so where we gathering at? We gathering at where my nieces and nephews called us to. It's social media. We're using the internets, right? That's where we're gathering at. Woke up this morning with my mind on Zoom. That's where we at. That's where we at right now, right? So come on to the 21st century. And let's find ourselves and access, right? Access the folk and then bring our true selves. Because quite frankly, you got grandchildren and children and great-grandchildren out there on the line. They love you or not, but they're not coming to your church building. They're not coming. If anything, we are understanding ourselves, understanding that we've actually died and just ain't lived into it yet. There's a new day if we would be honest about where we really are, right? Faith really now, let me say this as well, as I have seen and witnessed. Nieces and nephews out there on the block, they're deeply spiritual and faithful. They're deeply spiritual and faithful. They just ain't calling it this, and they ain't trying to hold up to all of them standards that you try to lift up, that we've tried to lift up and impose on this new day. In fact, we can't do it. So
they're going to talk about the Orishas.
How about that?
And burn some sage.
And let me be clear. When the Orishas embody people, it looked like the Holy Ghost make them roll around on the floor in a Pentecostal sense. I'm just saying. It's the same thing. When we were in Trinidad and Tobago and we went to a spiritual Baptist church, right? They were coming in and out of singing songs to the Orishas and woke up this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. They were coming in and out of that in a ritual of what they call going to the ground, having an initiation, right?
The threshing floor.
They were on the floor on the raw ground. 7 days and 7 nights, fasting, seeking God, seeking the presence of the Orisha, the manifestation of spirit in many different forms. That's what the Orishas are. So let's get clear. We do the same kind of stuff. We call it something other, but we do the same kind of stuff.
I think that's my posture, my position here. And I thank you, Dr. McRae, for that language of chaplaincy, because I think that our ministry of presence works and functions as chaplaincy. And I think that we're doing the work of connecting all of the tissue of our African identity, our African spirituality, our African American identity, our African American spirituality, and decolonizing this idea of religion completely. And not only decolonizing it, I think we're democratizing it, right? Because the institution has made it a top-down power, and that doesn't work in this generation because the leadership comes from among. Really, the ordo comes from among. And if we see activism as an act of worship, activism as spirituality, it may not be worship of the divine the way you name it, but it is an understanding of something greater than oneself. And then we can begin to be present in an authentic way and say, hey, this is the tradition I come from, and this is the gift that tradition brings. And let me hear about your tradition or your lack of tradition, and let's get this done in the comfort of relating on a human level. If we relate on a human level, we will ultimately be relating on a spiritual level.
Absolutely. As I know Bishop's going to bring us to a close for a bit, I wanted to offer these words as framing it from James Baldwin. And before those words are offered, I really want to say thank you, Bishop. Thank you, Dr. Donaldson. And encourage y'all who can hear and are watching this to join us in Asheville this summer. We going back to Asheville. We're going to be in Asheville every summer until we get justice for Jerry Williams. So please come, send funds of support to the family. Mama Najia is still raising Jerry's youngest. But I offer this this phrase that many of us have heard this quote before, and I offer this to y'all as recovery chaplains, as folks called to the gospel, as those called to both death and resurrection. James Baldwin says, if we know, then we must fight for your life as though it were our own.
Our own. Mm-hmm.
Which it is, and render impassable with our bodies, the corridors to the gas chambers, to the paddy wagons, to the protests, to the front lines in front of the pepper spray. For if they take you, Bishop, in the morning, I know they will be coming for us that night. Therefore, peace. Peace.
Woo! Yes, we gotta go. It's an hour. We're a little bit past time, but let me thank Dr. Donaldson. Thank you for jumping on and helping to make this conversation full-bodied. Reverend Dr. Ellie, I'm having a blast as a surrogate dad with you, calling you Reverend Doctor, and for real, and I ain't playing. Right, you got the paper on it. So thank you for what a fast and riveting conversation. We got to do more of this kind of conversation. We got to bring the real into these kinds of spaces and have and open up this conversation widely. I'm inspired. For those of you all who are watching, go back and watch Thursday nights. Conversations with CT Black women. Y'all, they turned it up. I don't know if we're gonna make that threshold. One of my friends texted and said, boy, they raising that bar. The Black women are raising that bar awfully high. And so we're trying to do our best to do a little bit of that. Let me tell you, our sister and our family, Ashley Yates, brought this to the movement. And I wanna close with this. Because there is another canon. I like whoever said that. We are writing another canon as we're going through right now. For me, my fifth gospel is Dr. King's letter from the Birmingham jail. Right, that's my fifth gospel. Then I got a sixth gospel. Give me any garden variety. James Baldwin, garden variety. You ain't got to go deep, just a little bit. And you all know, because y'all love me, y'all heard me, and y'all hear me talk about Howard Thurman until you can about throw up. So I love me some Howard Thurman on it. But then we got Audre Lorde, right? We got Katie Cannon, right? We got Kimberly Crenshaw. We got others. And we got Assata Shakur. And Ashley Yates reminded us that Shakata said, it is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Ashe and amen. Thank you all. Thank you all, family, for watching. Tomorrow, we're going to conclude this whole Holy Week activity, 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Well, Eastern Daylight Savings Time. I'm sorry. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. We're going to conclude our time together this Holy Week. Thank you again, the Reverend Dr. Elliot McCray, the Reverend Dr. Edward Donaldson III. I appreciate you. Love you all very much. We'll see y'all, family. Peace.